Pedwar, Gareth.
Question 4, Gareth Bennett.
Llywydd. Will the First Minister outline the Welsh Government's plans to protect listed buildings in Wales?
Llywydd, listed buildings form an important part of our heritage and are given special protection in legislation, recently strengthened by the Historic Environment Wales Act passed here in this National Assembly in 2016. Over this autumn, Cadw will launch a training programme for local authority conservation teams focusing on the role of enforcement action in protecting listed buildings.
Yes, thanks for that, and I look forward to progress reports from Cadw. We did have a slightly different emphasis from you when you were answering a question from Nick Ramsey recently about a particular planning issue in his area. Now, you said at that point that you were thinking about reviewing the rules around planning appeals. The question did relate to listed buildings. So in light of that response, could I ask you for any more detail on that and any timeframes for progress on that?
Well, so let me be clear about the nature of my exchange with Nick Ramsey last week. Nick was referring to Troy House in his constituency, a listed building where recent attempts to find a future for it have been difficult. And Nick Ramsey asked me a question about the way in which planning rules either support or get in the way of viable and sustainable use of those properties. And I undertook to make sure that we looked at the planning rulebook so that when a listed building does have a viable and sustainable use, that the planning system takes into account its status as a listed building. Because in the end, Llywydd, listing by itself is not enough. We have over 30,000 buildings listed here in Wales, and listing by itself does not guarantee that building a future. The building must have a future beyond listing, and that means finding a use for it in the future that will give it that viable use and that long-term future. That's what we want to provide here in Wales. We provide financial assistance for historic community assets, community halls, historic places of worship, and so on. The majority of listed buildings are in private hands, and private owners have to play their part too in finding those uses that will give those buildings a long-term future.